Veronica Stratton stood at floor-to-ceiling glass on the 60th floor, city spread beneath her like a kingdom. Late sun gilded her navy suit, angelic at a glance, until you felt the steel inside. Power, polished and merciless. She rehearsed a smile and a voice engineered to sound human. Integrity, merit, legacy. The words landed soft like velvet over a blade. Behind her, assistants darted with tablets and folders, moving as if the room itself might bite. One fixed lighting for gala photos. Another rechecked seating for the third time. The youngest hovered by the door, terrified of making noise. Nadia Briggs, event director, loyal lieutenant, entered with a cream folder and quiet, practiced control. At 41, Nadia anticipated Veronica before Veronica spoke. 12 years beside her meant witnessing genius and cruelty braided together. "Final guest list, Miss Stratton," Nadia said, placing the folder on the glass desk with careful hands. Veronica didn't turn. "Any surprises?" Nadia hesitated. "Your ex-husband confirmed." Veronica's reflection sharpened. "And he's bringing Celeste to win." The supermodel, 28, everywhere this year, was the most public kind of weapon. Martin Hale always chose spectacle when he wanted to hurt. Veronica's tone stayed airy. "Wonderful. Seat them where cameras get a perfect angle. I want the world to watch me, not care," Nadia typed, recognizing venom under silk. Tonight wasn't just charity. It was Veronica's stage. Proof she remained untouchable, even while tabloids chewed her personal life. 3 floors down, in the concrete sour garage, Ethan Carver hummed Ella Fitzgerald while polishing a spotless limo. The detail crew forgot a second pass, but Ethan didn't mind. Work like this calmed him, simple, honest, clean. He moved with quiet pride, the kind that doesn't ask to be seen. Invisible labor, done impeccably anyway. At 35, Ethan had learned dignity wasn't a title. It was choices made when nobody clapped. A security guard, Toby, called from the booth, joking that Ethan didn't need to do the detailing himself. There were people for that. Ethan smiled, never pausing. "I know, but if I want it right, I'd rather handle it." Another guard, Mark, laughed. "You're too good for this place. When you gonna stop driving rich folks and do something for you?" "Maybe I already am," Ethan said, calm enough to make them trade looks. A sleek Mercedes rolled up. An overdressed couple stepped out in casual diamonds. The woman pulled a crisp 50 from a designer bag, offering it like a test. Ethan met her eyes, respectful and steady. "That's kind, ma'am, but I'm just doing my job." She blinked, thrown off. Her husband chuckled and guided her away. When they vanished, Toby whistled. Ethan only said, "Some things aren't for sale." The guards shook their heads, amused and confused. They'd watched drivers hustle for tips for years. Ethan was different, carried himself like a man with nothing to prove and something precious to protect, even if nobody understood what. Upstairs, Nadia escaped to the break room for a coffee and oxygen. Near the window, 2 major donors murmured, low but not low enough. One, silver-haired from pharma money, said Veronica had something special planned for tonight. A tech billionaire, young, sharp, asked what special meant. The man snorted. "She picked someone to embarrass. It's a tradition now. Power as entertainment." The woman laughed uneasily. "That's cruel." He shrugged. "That's Veronica. You don't get that high by being nice," he added, like it was a law of physics. People show up knowing the deal. Nadia gripped her cup until her knuckles blanched, wishing it was just gossip, but feeling truth settle like dust. She'd seen cruelty dressed as cleverness, packaged as a show for wealthy spectators. Afternoon slid toward evening, and Selina Stratton burst into Veronica's office without knocking, messy desperation leaking through expensive fabric and forced confidence. Celine was 39, always living in her sister's shadow, and the strain showed now. "I need to talk," she said, voice wavering between rage and pleading. Veronica didn't look up. "Unless you're confirming you'll attend tonight, I'm busy." "I need money," Celine blurted. 50,000. Just to cover things until my investments hit." Veronica finally lifted her gaze, one eyebrow crisp with contempt. "Expenses? That's what we're calling gambling debt now?" Celine flushed. "How did you—" Veronica leaned back, cool and clinical. "I make it my business to know everything, especially family embarrassments. You lost 50 grand at poker and thought I wouldn't hear. No. I've bailed you out 3 times, Veronica continued. At some point, consequences have to teach you what I can't. Celine's eyes glossed. You're unbelievable. You have billions and won't help your own sister? I could, Veronica said, icy calm. I choose not to. Helping you would train you to stay weak. I don't enable weakness. Celine froze, fists clenched, then turned and slammed the door hard enough to rattle the art. Veronica went back to her papers as if Celine was a minor interruption. Nadia, watching from her desk, felt something cold settle in her stomach. This was the woman she'd served, whose ruthlessness she'd labeled strength for years. Later, Veronica slid into the limo, phone pressed to her ear, juggling 3 conversations across apps. Ethan shut the door softly and adjusted the mirror until he could see her clearly. "Le Atelier on 5th, she ordered. "And hurry." "Yes, ma'am," Ethan replied, easing into traffic like the city belonged to him. Nadia sat beside Veronica with her tablet, taking notes as Veronica rewrote the evening's program on the fly. Yet Veronica's attention kept drifting, restless. She ended her calls and stared at the skyline. "I'm bored, Nadia," she said. Desperate, almost childish. Nadia offered carefully that the gala was always exciting. Veronica scoffed. Same faces, same scripts, fake concern bought with champagne. "Sometimes," Veronica murmured, "we need to shake the room, remind them why they come." Her eyes slid to the mirror, finding Ethan's reflection. He was focused, calm, immaculate. She noticed details she'd never bothered to see before. His shirt was old, but pressed razor-sharp. His tie was cheap, but perfectly knotted. Even his simple cufflinks gleamed. "Look at him," Veronica said, amused. "Our driver is more put together than half the men at my tables." Nadia glanced at Ethan, uneasy. Veronica's smile turned strange. "He's more composed than Martin, and Martin spends 5 grand on suits." Later, Veronica emerged from a fitting in an emerald gown, old Hollywood royalty with colder eyes. As Ethan held the car door, a voice crackled on speaker, Councilman Blake Hardwick, joking with colleagues. "Invite the help sometimes," he laughed. "Remind people of hierarchy. That's what these events are about, showing everyone their place." Veronica paused mid-step, the idea forming like ice. She studied Ethan, really studied him, and something dangerous lit behind her eyes. "Nadia," she said slowly, "do we have extra invitations?" Nadia's stomach sank. "A few, yes." "Good," Veronica said, smile sharpening, "because I've decided to make tonight interesting." Back at Stratton Tower, donors clustered in the lobby. Veronica stepped out, then turned to Ethan with exaggerated warmth, loud enough for phones and ears. "Ethan," she announced, beaming, "you've been wonderful, attentive, professional. I'd like you to attend tonight's gala as my guest." The lobby went silent. Heads pivoted. Cameras rose. This was unexpected, and the crowd wanted proof. Ethan looked at her. Unreadable. For a breath, Veronica felt uncertainty. What if he refused and exposed her? Then Ethan nodded. "Thank you, Miss Stratton. I'd be honored." Triumph flashed through her smile. 7 o'clock. Don't be late." She swept away with Nadia, leaving murmurs behind. Ethan stood beside the limo, invitation heavy despite being paper. Across the street, Damian Turner watched through his camera. 36, investigative journalist, allergic to powerful lies and expensive perfume. Damian had trailed Veronica for months, following corruption like a scent. Seeing Ethan invited changed the story. Damian knew Ethan from childhood. Same neighborhood, same cracked sidewalks, same dreams before life split their paths. Damian texted fast, "Brother, what are you doing? She's poison." Ethan replied, "It's complicated." Damian lowered his camera, worry tightening. He recognized that tone, meaning Ethan had a plan, and plans around Veronica Stratton tended to draw blood. That evening, in a modest studio 15 blocks away, Ethan stared at the embossed invitation. His apartment was simple but cared for. Books on makeshift shelves, a single-framed graduation photo of Ethan with a woman sharing his eyes. His phone rang. Mrs. Cheng next door, voice muffled even before he answered. "Ethan, I saw fancy cars. You win lottery?" He laughed softly. "No, Mrs. Cheng, just invited to a party." She warned him, "Rich people devour their own. They'll be worse to someone like you," she said. Ethan promised caution, though he didn't feel certain. He cooked his usual budget pasta, but his mind kept drifting. Neighbors texted jokes about him becoming famous off Veronica's invitation. "Wear your uniform." "Take food pics." Ethan answered none. He ate slowly, thinking about roads that led here. As city lights blinked on outside his window, he decided he would attend, but not for the reason Veronica wanted. At Stratton Tower, Veronica held a strategy meeting. Champagne, schedules, donation targets. Eventually, they circled back to Ethan. A marketing director asked, "You think he'll come?" Veronica smirked. "Oh, he'll come. He keeps his word." "The question is what he'll wear," someone joked. Laughter spread. Uniform, cheap rental tux, awkward discomfort. They painted him as an icebreaker, a living punchline. Veronica called it educational, exposure to how the other half lives. Only Nadia stayed silent, champagne untouched. She'd seen this pattern. 3 years earlier, Veronica invited a janitor to a corporate dinner as appreciation. It ended with the man in tears, humiliated by jokes designed to exclude. He quit the next day. Nadia once told herself the janitor was sensitive. Veronica well-intentioned. Watching Veronica now, eyes bright with anticipation of Ethan's embarrassment, Nadia couldn't keep the lie intact. When the meeting ended, she stayed behind, voice low. "Veronica," Nadia asked, "what are you really doing tonight?" Veronica looked surprised. "Hosting a gala." Nadia pressed, "With Ethan. What are you trying to do to him?" For a flicker, the mask slipped, something ugly flashing beneath polish. Then the composure returned. "I'm giving him an opportunity," Veronica said smoothly. "If he's embarrassed, that's reality, not my fault. I'm simply showing him where he belongs." Nadia left without arguing, but her decision formed on the elevator ride. She would warn him. She would give Ethan the choice Veronica never intended him to have. Morning light filled Ethan's apartment as he opened his closet. Most clothes were practical. But at the back, wrapped in plastic, waited a suit from another life. He laid it on the bed, fingertips tracing fabric like a memory. He checked his watch, grabbed keys, and stepped into a waking city. The tailor shop sat on a quiet street not yet fully swallowed by gentrification. Faded sign, warm interior. Inside smelled of cloth and careful craft. An elderly seamstress looked up, eyes brightening. "Professor Carver," she said, then faltered. Ethan smiled gently. "It's all right, Miss Paget, just Ethan now. I haven't been a professor in a long time." She studied him with eyes that had seen decades of ambition and regret. "You could have been," she said softly. "Everyone said you were brilliant, your research, your papers." She caught herself, apologizing for prying. Ethan changed the subject. "I need help." "Event tonight," he said. "I need to look like I belong, even if I don't." Miss Paget smiled with quiet certainty. "You belong wherever you choose. Let's make sure the outside matches the dignity you carry." She measured, pinned, and planned. Across town, Celine sat in an expensive cafe, stirring sugar into coffee she wouldn't drink. Graham Vale slid into the booth. 40, hedge fund predator with a friendly smile that never reached his eyes. "You look troubled," he said, ordering espresso. "My sister is a monster," Celine replied flatly. Graham chose his words. "A competitor, yes. Monster is strong." Celine laughed bitterly. "She refused to loan me $50,000. She spends that on shoes." Graham's interest sharpened, hungry and calculating. "That must feel humiliating," he said. Celine leaned in, voice low. "I want her to feel what it's like when people see through her perfect image." Graham offered the gala as a stage. Cameras, donors, attention. If something went wrong, it would go viral. Celine met his eyes, understanding and mistrust. Celine wanted Veronica humbled. Graham wanted her connection shattered so he could rise in the vacuum. They talked for an hour in conspiratorial whispers, alleys by desperation, neither fully honest about the endgame. That afternoon, Nadia sat in her car outside Ethan's building, hands tight on the wheel. She'd pulled his address from employee files, telling herself it was right even if it felt like treason. She climbed to 3B and knocked. Ethan opened the door, surprise flickering. "Miss Briggs, everything okay?" Nadia asked to come in. The apartment was modest but spotless. Nadia perched on the sofa edge, choosing words carefully. "I think you should know. Her invitation may not be kindness. She's planning to humiliate you," Nadia admitted. "She's done it before. I stayed quiet then, but I can't now. You don't deserve it." Ethan listened with calm that unsettled her. "I assumed as much," he said, voice steady. Nadia blinked. "Then why go?" Ethan's gaze held weight. "Some debts get paid in silence," he said. "But some truths need to be spoken." He rose, gently ending the visit without cruelty. Nadia left more confused, but oddly relieved. Whatever Ethan was walking into, he wasn't blind. As evening neared, Veronica's mansion turned into a glittering fable, if fables were written by accountants. Chandeliers, red carpet, velvet ropes, paparazzi, hungry for celebrity and scandal. Staff moved with choreographed precision, flowers and lighting tuned to Veronica's standards. Nadia oversaw the machine, but her mind kept drifting to Ethan's cryptic words. In the kitchen corridor, 2 servers whispered, "He's invited as a joke." Cruel, even for her. Bets grew. $20 he won't show. 30 he comes in work clothes. Nadia wanted to shut them down, to defend someone, Veronica or Ethan, but couldn't find an honest defense. She walked away, checking her phone like answers might appear by magic. Across town, Damien sat in a cramped office, drowning in files and stale coffee, tracing money trails tied to Veronica and Hardwick. University records arrived through a favor. Damien found a disciplinary hearing from 12 years ago. Whistleblower complaint about Mises funds. Buried in witness statements was a name that iced Damien's blood, Veronica Stratton, then a graduate student giving testimony that contradicted the whistleblower's evidence. The professor had been discredited, blacklisted, erased. Veronica graduated with honors 6 months later. Immediately after, she landed a cushy job in Hardwick's office, salary triple an entry-level role. Damien called a colleague. "I need everything on Dr. Marisol Carver. Professor, whistleblower, vanished from academia about 12 years ago." The colleague asked what angle. Damien didn't hesitate. "I think Veronica helped destroy her," Damien said, "and I think her son has been driving Veronica for 2 years without speaking a word." The colleague called it insane. Damien agreed, then admitted that was exactly why it mattered. While Damien dug, the past sat in a small apartment watching the news. Dr. Marisol Carver, 60, gray threaded through dark hair, saw coverage of the gala. When the anchor praised Veronica's philanthropy and education initiatives, Marisol froze, then shut off the TV with trembling hands. 12 years she'd tried to forget that name. She'd lost her career, reputation, research, everything, after trying to protect scholarship money meant for struggling students. Her phone rang. Ethan's name appeared. "Mom," he said carefully, warmth wrapped around a hard decision. "I'm attending Veronica Stratton's gala tonight." Silence stretched. "Why?" Marisol whispered. Ethan's answer came steady. "Because running hasn't healed either of us. Because she needs to remember what her success cost, and because I'm done being afraid of the truth." "She'll ruin you like she ruined me," Marisol warned. Ethan's voice softened, then hardened again. "She already tried. The day she destroyed your career, she wrecked my future too. But we survived. Tonight, I'll show her survival looks like strength, not surrender." After the call, Marisol sat in darkness as memories flooded. Hearings, accusations, colleagues abandoning her, press painting her as bitter. She remembered young Veronica's earnest face on the stand, convincing and ruthless. At the mansion, guests began arriving in glittering waves. Luxury cars deposited confidence. Veronica greeted them in emerald perfection, smile calibrated, eyes cold. Hardwick arrived with staff and security, kissing her hand with theatrical charm. "You've outdone yourself," he said. Veronica replied with a smile. "Wait until you see the entertainment." Celine arrived alone, wearing a dress worth more than Ethan's rent, yet looking smaller inside it, hunched with resentment. She slipped into the crowd. The ballroom filled with fortunes that could bankroll nations. Champagne flowed, laughter performed, art praised by people who didn't understand it. Nadia hovered at the edges, watching. Servers confirmed Ethan hadn't canceled. Bets among staff climbed past $200. Veronica kept glancing at the entrance. Part of her hoped Ethan wouldn't come and deny her control. The larger part needed him to arrive, for dominance to feel real. Outside, flashes popped. Senator, billionaire, actress turned philanthropist. Still no Ethan. Nadia stood on the steps, heart sinking. Maybe he'd chosen escape over humiliation. She couldn't blame him. Then headlights appeared at the end of the long drive, slow and deliberate. The car wasn't modest. A midnight blue vintage. Rolls-Royce glided forward like old money resurrected. The crowd quieted. Cameras swiveled. It stopped precisely at the carpet's edge. The door opened, and Ethan stepped out. Not as a chauffeur, but as a man arriving. He wore an ivory suit tailored to perfection, shirt crisp, tie charcoal, pocket square, matched like intent. But the clothing wasn't the shock. It was his presence. Quiet confidence, no apology, no bravado. He moved like someone who knew his worth without needing witnesses. A valet froze as Ethan handed over keys. Phones rose like fireflies. "Who is that?" someone whispered. "That's her driver," another answered, stunned. Nadia watched, mouth parted. This wasn't a disguise. This looked like revelation, a truth stepping out of shadow. Inside, Veronica heard the commotion and moved toward the entrance. Seeing Ethan, radiant, composed, her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. This wasn't the script. He was supposed to be awkward, out of place, proof of hierarchy. Instead, he looked like he owned the night. Their eyes met across the red carpet. In that glance, Veronica realized she'd miscalculated. She hadn't invited a punchline. She'd invited a pivot point. Ethan's arrival shifted the room's gravity, and people felt it before they could name it. Veronica recovered fast, performance instincts snapping in. She glided forward, arms open, a smile blinding under camera flashes. "Ethan," she sang, delighted surprise in her tone. "I'm so glad you came, and that suit, how elegant. I had no idea you owned something like that." The compliment was a reminder, a subtle knife. You're still the help. Ethan met her gaze, calm and exact. "I earned it, Mrs. Stratton," he said, "a long time ago." The words landed heavy, hinting at history the room hadn't been invited to see yet. Guests traded glances, curiosity replacing mockery. Veronica's smile tightened, barely. "Come inside," she said brightly. "Enjoy yourself." As they entered, Ethan became a magnet for speculation. People who'd never noticed him in uniform now studied him like a riddle. Near the champagne fountain, socialites whispered, "Maybe he's a secret investor, old money hiding, royalty incognito." Another insisted she'd seen him driving Veronica. "But look at him," she hissed. "That suit's custom. That posture isn't borrowed." The rumor spread like perfume. Across the room, Hardwick watched, instincts prickling. He'd survived by reading power shifts, and Ethan's presence threatened the hierarchy he and Veronica curated. He pulled Veronica aside. "Who is he?" he demanded. Veronica tried to sound casual. "My driver," a goodwill gesture. Hardwick's eyes narrowed. "He doesn't move like someone receiving charity." His voice lowered. "He moves like someone waiting for something." A chill slid through Veronica, but she refused to show it. One well-dressed driver couldn't collapse an empire. Could he? Veronica spotted Celine staring at Ethan, shock mixing with something like hope. Celine, for all her flaws, recognized authenticity. Across the ballroom, Damien slipped in with press credentials, hunting a story. He found Ethan near a sculpture worth more than their childhood blocks. "Brother," Damien murmured, using their old bond, "this is dangerous." Ethan's first real warmth appeared. Small, genuine. "When has danger stopped us?" Damien started to argue, but Ethan cut through. "I'm not here to force anything. I'm here to watch." Ethan accepted champagne from a server like it meant nothing. "Sometimes truth doesn't need help," he said. "It needs an audience." Damien wanted to drag him out, but he'd known Ethan too long. When Ethan decided, the world adjusted, not the other way around. "Tonight's the night, then," Damien said softly. Ethan nodded. For her to finish what she started 12 years ago. Before Damien could press, lights dimmed, the program beginning. Veronica stepped to the podium, screen behind her flashing tonight's education charity logo with bitter irony. Veronica began her speech, voice amplified, polished sincerity poured like champagne. Education is the foundation. Then she stalled, because Ethan entered from a side door, searching for a better view, unintentionally pulling the room's attention like a tide. Heads turned. Cameras swiveled away from Veronica. The room's compass needle snapped to Ethan, and Veronica, who never lost command, felt control slip in real time. She continued, but rhythm broke. Her words about merit and opportunity rang hollow under the night's obvious cruelty. Applause came, polite and distracted. Conversations resumed, but not about the charity. Dinner followed, tables placed with military precision. Ethan sat with major donors who didn't realize they were sharing space with the driver. A diamond-heavy matron asked about his background. "Your accent, interesting," she said. "Not quite local. What did you study?" Ethan paused with fork midair. He could deflect, keep the barrier intact. But her curiosity felt real, not performative. "I started at Columbia," he said. "Grad work, economics and social policy." Silence spread. Columbia wasn't for people who opened car doors. "Why didn't you finish?" asked a tech titan. Ethan's gaze lowered briefly. "Life had other plans," he said, weight in his voice discouraging more. But the revelation was already loose in the room. Whispers sparked. Veronica's driver studied at Columbia. Veronica's driver speaks like a peer. Veronica's driver isn't what he seems. Veronica heard the currents and marched toward a nearby table, determined to reclaim dominance through humor sharpened into cruelty. "I see you've met Ethan," she said brightly. "Best parking attendant we've ever hired. Isn't our event wonderfully diverse?" The jab aimed to pin him back into place. Instead, it thudded wrong. Guests shifted, discomfort thickening. Even ruthless people recognized unnecessary meanness. Ethan set down his glass with care. His voice stayed gentle, but it carried authority. "Respect is free, Missy Stratton," he said quietly. "We offer it or we don't, and it reflects on us, not the person we're speaking to." Silence fell. Absolute. A few guests nodded, almost involuntary. Others looked away from Veronica, embarrassed for her. She laughed like it was a joke and moved on, but her hand trembled when she reached for fresh champagne. Nadia watched and felt her old justifications crack like thin ice. Near the bar, a longtime donor whispered to his wife, "Carver. That name rings a bell. Didn't the university have a Professor Carver who accused someone of misusing scholarship funds?" His wife frowned, then remembered. "Marisol, big scandal. She lost her job." The man quietly searched on his phone, pretending to check messages. Articles surfaced within seconds. Dr. Marisol Carver, whistleblower, discredited. Buried in one piece was a quote from a graduate student who testified against her, Veronica Stratton. The donor's eyes widened. He showed his wife. She gasped, then stared at Ethan with sudden clarity. In a room built on information, secrets didn't stay small. By dessert, at least a dozen guests had connected the threads, or were close to doing so. Veronica sensed the shift but couldn't name it. People watched her differently. Curiosity, suspicion, maybe hunger for a fall. She cornered Celine in a hallway, composure cracking. "What's happening? Why are they whispering? Why are they looking at me like that?" Celine, emboldened by champagne and years of resentment, smiled coldly. "Maybe they're finally seeing you clearly." Veronica demanded explanation. Celine nodded toward the ballroom. The man you invited as entertainment. People see dignity in him, and it makes you look small. Celine leaned closer. Some of them are remembering things. A professor who got destroyed and who helped destroy her. Veronica's face blanched. You don't know what you're talking about. Celine's eyes hardened. I've watched you climb over anyone in your way. I just didn't know you did it to him, Celine finished, voice quiet and vicious. You made a mistake, Veronica. Some people don't stay buried. Later, the party shifted into networking, real business conducted in hushed clusters. Ethan stepped onto a balcony, breathing jasmine and cigar smoke. He wasn't alone long. Hardwick joined him, closing the glass door with deliberate care. The politician's friendly mask was gone. I need to know, he said, blunt. Who invited you into this level of society? Ethan faced him calmly. Miss Stratton, you were on the call. Ethan's eyes stayed steady. You joked about inviting the help to remind people of hierarchy. Hardwick's jaw tightened, memory stinging. His careless humor now felt like a loose thread unraveling the whole garment. What do you want? Hardwick asked. Money? A job? Everyone wants something. Truth finds its way home, Councilman. Ethan replied softly. That's all I want, truth arriving where it belongs. Hardwick's voice dropped into a threat. I've destroyed people for less. People with more power than some driver with an unfinished Ivy education. Then you have nothing to worry about, Ethan said, calm like stone. If you've done nothing wrong, truth can't hurt you. Hardwick stared, searching for a crack. Finding none, he turned back inside, mind already racing through damage control. Ethan's phone buzzed, his mother. He answered in the balcony's quiet corner. Mom. Marisol's voice carried fear wrapped in love. Be careful. Truth ruined us before. Ethan replied firmly. This time I choose how it ends. We're not powerless anymore. Don't lose yourself to revenge, Marisol pleaded. Ethan's voice softened. This isn't revenge, it's restoration. They spoke a few minutes more. Then he hung up and returned inside, unaware Nadia was across town with Damien, making her own irreversible choice. In Damien's office, Nadia opened her laptop. I have something you need, she said, voice shaking. I've been Veronica's right hand for 12 years. I kept secrets, protected her image. Tonight I watched her try to crush Ethan for fun, and I can't do it anymore. Nadia revealed a folder of emails, financial records, old correspondence between Veronica and Hardwick, evidence of a coordinated smear campaign 12 years ago. Hardwick was skimming scholarship funds, she explained. Veronica learned it as a grad student. Instead of reporting, she made a deal. She testified against Dr. Carver, Nadia continued, buried the complaint, and Hardwick rewarded her with a position after graduation. Damien stared, journalist's mind assembling the blast radius. Why show me now? He asked. Nadia didn't flinch, because Ethan deserves justice. His mother deserves her name back. And I'm tired of being complicit, Nadia added, closing the laptop like a verdict. Damien exhaled slowly. This will destroy her. Nadia's eyes were wet but steady. Maybe, or maybe it forces her to face what she did. Either way, truth deserves daylight. Back at the mansion, whispers became conversations, clusters comparing notes, feeding off the thrill of a perfect woman wobbling. The wealthy adored a fall, especially from someone who'd always seemed untouchable. Veronica tried to steer talk back to charity, but the room had moved past her. People watched Ethan instead, how he listened, how he spoke, how he refused to shrink. Veronica felt walls closing, though she couldn't see the bricks. She pulled loyal donors into side conversations, but their attention kept slipping toward the driver, who didn't behave like one. Celine drifted through the crowd like a rumor made flesh, satisfied and wary. Somewhere, Graham Vale watched too, calculating how to leverage chaos. Nadia was gone. Her absence would matter later. Damien's story was already forming, and stories like that didn't stay contained. Ethan stood with a small group, answering questions with careful honesty. Never begging, never boasting. His restraint made him more compelling. People who'd once joked about his clothing now tried to prove they'd always been the kind who respected everyone, as if rewriting their own history. Veronica's laugh grew sharper, more forced. Her eyes tracked phones, cameras, whispers. She sensed her past moving through the room like a draft under a locked door. The gala's purpose, education, opportunity, had become a cruel mirror reflecting her own contradictions. On the balcony again, Ethan let the night air cool his skin. Inside, the garden lights twinkled like expensive stars. He didn't look triumphant, only resolved. He was no longer hiding behind a uniform someone else assigned him. He was letting the truth stand beside him. Hardwick reappeared briefly near the doors, speaking to aides with clipped urgency. Veronica watched him, then watched Ethan, then watched the guests watching her. The hierarchy she worshipped had shifted, and she couldn't buy it back with a smile. Ethan moved back into the ballroom, blending without shrinking. The crowd parted for him, not because he demanded it, but because dignity has its own gravity. Veronica's emerald gown suddenly looked like armor that no longer fit. Rumors linked names and dates, and those connections turned into quiet certainty. Veronica had once stood on a witness stand and helped silence a professor who tried to protect the students. Now, that professor's son stood in her house, calm, immaculate, and impossible to erase. Veronica tried one more time to reclaim the room, greeting, laughing, redirecting, but every move felt late. The audience had shifted. The spectacle wasn't Ethan's discomfort. It was Veronica's fear, finally visible around the edges of her perfect performance. Ethan's phone stayed silent now. He didn't need instructions. Across town, Damien saved files, drafted outlines, and prepared calls. Nadia sat beside him, pale but committed. Whatever happened next would be irreversible, and both of them knew it. At the mansion, Marisol's warning echoed in Ethan's chest. Don't lose yourself. He repeated his own answer. Restoration, not revenge. He kept his voice steady, his actions measured, letting Veronica's choices speak louder than any accusation he could shout. Guests clustered, hungry for certainty. Some wanted to help Ethan, some wanted to shield Veronica for business reasons. Most wanted to witness the collapse of a myth. Veronica felt it, like standing on glass and hearing the first fine crack. Ethan looked across the ballroom, meeting Veronica's gaze once more. No smirk, no cruelty. Just a quiet, unblinking reminder that the past doesn't disappear because powerful people demand it. It only waits, patient, until someone stops running. In Damien's office, Nadia slid one last document forward. Proof, tying timelines, payments, favors. Damien's expression hardened. This wasn't gossip, it was structure. A cover-up with names and receipts. The kind of story that rearranged lives, careers, and reputations overnight. Nadia whispered, almost to herself. I protected her because I told myself it was strength. Tonight I saw it was just cruelty wearing success. Damien nodded, already hearing tomorrow's headlines. The city would wake up to a different narrative, one Veronica hadn't written. Back under chandeliers, Veronica smiled at donors, but the smile was slipping. Conversation stopped when she approached, then restarted after she left, quieter and sharper. She had built an empire on controlling rooms. Tonight, the room had chosen someone else as its center. Ethan remained composed, refusing to become a villain in anyone's story, even Veronica's. That restraint made him dangerous to her, because it left her nowhere to point, nowhere to blame. The truth didn't need theatrics, it only needed space to breathe. By the end of the night's social swirl, the mansion felt smaller, the air tighter, and Veronica's power less absolute. Around her, whispers multiplied into certainty. The wealthy leaned in, eager for fallout, while Ethan stood steady, waiting for truth to arrive. The story had slipped from Veronica Stratton's grip. She hid in her private study, claiming an urgent call but really craving AIR. In the window's dark glass, she saw not a titan, just a woman cracked beneath perfection. Her phone buzzed hard. A text from Celine. They know. People linked Ethan to Dr. Marisol Carver. Brace yourself. Veronica's fingers trembled as she set the phone down, suddenly hearing every whisper as thunder. She'd believed burying the past made it stay buried. She told herself winning excused the method, that time-sanded consequences smooth. Alone, with her empire shaking outside the door, she understood how childish that faith had been. A soft knock startled her. Nadia Briggs stepped in without waiting. "Did you destroy them?" she asked, quiet but steady. "The Carvers. Did you help Hardwick cover theft? Did you smear an innocent professor to climb?" Veronica tried to summon her usual ice, deny, redirect, charm. But Nadia's face held hurt, betrayal, and exhausted disappointment. The armor failed. "Yes," Veronica whispered. "I was 25, terrified of staying poor. He offered an exit." Words spilled, ugly and honest. She told herself Marisol might be wrong, that the process would correct things. But deep down, she'd known the professor was right, and she still helped bury it to save herself. "And you never felt guilt?" Nadia pressed. Veronica surprised herself. "Every day. But guilt doesn't rewrite history. The world rewards winners, not the remorseful." She swallowed. "I took what I thought I deserved." Nadia's voice hardened into steel. "You deserved nothing. You earned nothing. You stole from people who couldn't fight back, then spent 12 years calling it strength." She turned to the door, hand on the handle. "I resign after tonight," Nadia said. "I'll finish the evening because that's who I am, not because you earned my loyalty." She left, and the click of the latch sounded like a verdict closing. Outside the study, the party rolled on. Ethan Carver moved through the crowd with quiet ease, not chasing attention, not dodging it. When an elderly donor's mother asked him to dance, he smiled and offered his hand. He guided her into a simple waltz, patient and warm, adjusting his steps to hers. Guests watched, softened. It wasn't flashy, just gentle competence, the kind that made onlookers feel ashamed of their earlier jokes. Veronica emerged in time to see the dance end, Ethan helping the woman settle safely back. Envy twisted sharp in her chest, not romantic but bitter. He earned respect with ease, while she fought for it like oxygen. She caught his arm before he could drift away. "Why did you really come?" she asked low. For the first time tonight, she saw something in his eyes that looked like pity, quiet, unwilling but unmistakable. "To return what was taken," Ethan said softly, "and to let you reveal why it was stolen." Veronica's breath snagged. "You want revenge?" He shook his head. "No, I want acknowledgement, truth, my mother's name restored." Revenge is easy, Ethan continued, voice calm as stone. Justice is harder. Either you face it or you show everyone who you are, and the room decides without you. He walked away, leaving her stranded among chandeliers and strangers. Veronica finally understood. Ethan hadn't come to burn her down. He'd come to hand her a choice, one she couldn't buy, threaten, or charm away. That choice would define not just tonight, but whatever life followed. Shaken, like she hadn't been since graduate school, she retreated again, away from eyes that tracked her, away from whispers multiplying by the minute. Her old fear returned, not of scandal, but of being seen clearly. She locked herself in a marble and gold powder room, staring into an ornate mirror. Her emerald gown, once armor, now looked like costume jewelry on a bruised truth. She gripped the sink until her knuckles whitened. "I will not be outshined by a driver," she told her reflection, though the words sounded thin. "I built this. I earned this." Even as she spoke, she heard the hollowness echo back at her like laughter in an empty room. She reapplied lipstick she didn't need, reconstructing perfection like spackle over a crack. Outside, on the grand staircase, Nadia found Damien Turner waiting, press badge visible, eyes sharper than any blade in Veronica's collection. "I gave you everything," Nadia murmured, checking for eavesdroppers. Emails, financial records, the timeline, Veronica and Hardwick coordinating to ruin Dr. Carver. Damien studied her. "Why now? You worked for her 12 years. Nadia's eyes shone with unshed tears. "Fear can look like loyalty when you're surviving. I told myself it wasn't my job to judge. Then tonight I watched her try to humiliate a good man for sport, and I couldn't lie anymore." She inhaled, shoulders lifting as if shedding a weight. "I stayed because I was afraid to start over, afraid to lose comfort. Now, I'd rather be broke and honest than wealthy and complicit. Use it. They deserve truth." Damien nodded, respect clear. "You're doing the right thing." Nadia's mouth curved sadly. It took too long. Real courage would have been 12 years ago. Still, she stood straighter than she had in years. In a quieter sitting room lined with antiques and art priced like small homes, Celine found Ethan by a window. "I need to ask you something," she said, nervous but determined. Ethan turned fully, open expression, kind eyes. "Are you going to expose her publicly?" Celine asked. "Destroy Veronica the way she destroyed your mother?" Ethan paused, weighing words carefully. "I'm not here to destroy anyone. I'm here so truth can exist without hiding." "If truth ruins your sister," Ethan added, "or forces her to become better, that's her decision, not mine." Celine's eyes filled. "I've hated her so long. Hated how everyone adored her while I lived as her disappointment. But knowing it was all built on betrayal doesn't make me happy," Celine admitted. "It just makes me sad, like we wasted years being people we weren't." Ethan's voice softened. "You deserve more than being anyone's shadow. You deserve your own choices," he told her. "Your own life, built on your terms." Celine wiped her tears, something shifting inside her, not revenge but release. "Thank you," she whispered, startled by being seen without contempt. "We're all bigger than the roles people assign us," Ethan said. "The question is whether we're brave enough to step into who we really are." Celine nodded, breathing like someone tasting freedom for the first time. Back in the ballroom, the atmosphere had changed its chemistry. What started as Veronica's showcase had become a reckoning. Guests clustered in intense circles, trading fragments of information like currency, each adding a piece to the puzzle. Near the dessert table, a philanthropist spoke about Dr. Marisol Carver with reverence. "Brilliant," she said. "Her work on inequality and educational access was groundbreaking. When she filed her complaint, I believed her immediately. Integrity ran through her. Then the investigation cleared everyone," the woman continued, "and suddenly she was accused of lying. Her career died overnight." Someone asked, quiet and stunned, "And Veronica testified against her?" The philanthropist nodded grimly. "That's what I'm hearing tonight," she said. "Veronica was a grad student tied to Hardwick's office. Afterward, she landed a prestigious job that launched everything." Around them, phones lit up as guests hunted old articles like scavengers. The story assembled itself in real time. At the bar, a tech billionaire showed his wife a recording. Veronica calling Ethan a prop earlier, assuming microphones were dead. "It's already online," he muttered. "It's spreading fast." His wife watched, face hardening. "That's cruel, pointless cruelty. And after watching Ethan tonight, it makes Veronica look petty." The billionaire scrolled. "People are digging up the old scandal, too. By morning, this will be everywhere." Veronica reappeared in a different gown, soft cream, calculated gentleness. She moved to the front, ready to reset the room with a second speech, one about second chances and lifting people up. But skepticism stared back at her. She began anyway, voice smooth and practiced. Yet guests had heard the prop comment. They'd felt her cruelty. Her words about compassion struck the air like cheap perfume, trying to mask smoke that had already soaked the walls. "We gather tonight," Veronica said, "to celebrate education's power to transform lives." Glances traded like knives. The irony hurt. A woman who helped destroy an educator now preaching about education as virtue, as if the past hadn't happened. She pushed through to the end, but applause came, polite and cold. Obligation, not admiration. Councilman Blake Hardwick, sensing danger to his own skin, cornered Ethan near an exit. Charm stripped down to raw aggression. "Stay in your lane," Hardwick hissed, breath reeking of expensive scotch. "Whatever you think you're doing ends now. You're out of your depth, boy." Ethan met his gaze without flinching, expression steady as a courthouse wall. "You and Veronica built roads on other people's backs," Ethan said quietly. "Roads paved with stolen scholarship money, with careers crushed to protect your secrets, with lies dressed up as testimony." His voice didn't rise, but it carried. "The only person drowning," Ethan finished, "is you. Truth rises, no matter how deep you bury it." Nearby, a prominent lawyer who'd pretended to check her phone froze. She'd heard every word. Her eyes widened. She slipped away to call someone. Hardwick's face flushed with rage, but before he could respond, someone summoned him for a photo. He left with a final glare, not realizing his threats had already become gossip that would mutate into headlines before sunrise. Near the kitchen entrance, Nadia checked her tablet and saw a notification that iced her blood. The prop audio had been posted anonymously. Thousands of shares, then tens of thousands. News outlets were already sniffing, reposting, embedding, amplifying. Nadia looked across the ballroom at Veronica, still working donors like chess pieces, unaware the internet had set her world on fire. For years, Nadia would have warned her, protected her. Tonight, she chose something else. Nadia quietly forwarded the link to major news desks with one line. Veronica Stratton's true character, recorded at her charity gala. No flourish, no apology, just truth delivered to people trained to weaponize it. Veronica raised her champagne for a toast, smiling bright and false. To humility, she declared. The virtue that keeps us grounded no matter how high we rise. She waited for glasses to lift, crystal to clink, adoration to obey. Nothing. No one joined. Silence bloomed across the room, louder than any accusation. Veronica stood with her glass raised like a statue of denial. For the first time in her adult life, she was utterly alone in a room she owned. Across the ballroom, Ethan watched, eyes sad but steady. He hadn't wanted humiliation. He wanted acknowledgement, justice for Marisol. Yet, seeing Veronica's face as she realized no one would drink to her, he felt no triumph, only weight. To break the cruelty of that silence, Ethan began clapping. Slow at first, then stronger. Not for Veronica, but for the staff. The servers, cooks, tech crew, cleaners. The people who made tonight possible and usually received nothing but demands. For the ones who work without recognition, Ethan said, voice carrying clearly, who serve without expecting praise, who do their jobs with dignity whether anyone notices or not. The room erupted into applause. Real, warm, unanimous. Staff paused mid-task, stunned. Some smiled through tears. Others pressed hands to mouths, overwhelmed by being seen. Nadia found herself crying silently, shaken by the simple grace. Respect, so scarce in Veronica's orbit, had been given freely by Ethan. Veronica stood frozen, champagne glass still lifted, as the mansion honored everyone except her. She lowered it slowly, hand shaking. Celine approached cautiously. Veronica whispered, barely audible, this was never about embarrassing him. Celine studied her sister's face, and for once didn't gloat. He came to teach you something, Celine said softly, or remind you what you took from yourself. Veronica's eyes glistened, but she refused to let tears fall in public. You traded integrity for success, Celine continued, and tonight you're finally seeing the bill. Veronica stared at Ethan like he was a mirror she couldn't shatter. The party had slipped beyond performance. Real emotions simmered everywhere now. Ethan stepped onto a balcony for air, needing distance from the heat of the room. He wasn't alone long. The glass door opened behind him, and he turned, jaw tightening, to a figure he never expected to see here tonight. Dr. Marisol Carver stood in the doorway. Elegant, in a simple black dress that held more dignity than all the designer gowns inside. Ethan's composure cracked for the first time. "Mom, what are you doing here?" he breathed. "Damien called," Marisol said, stepping onto the balcony. "He said you needed me. He said it was time I stopped hiding from the woman who tried to erase me." Behind them, the ballroom sensed a shift and leaned toward it. Whispers rippled. Those who recognized Marisol's name understood the moment's gravity. Veronica, mid-conversation with donors who could barely hide judgment, looked up, and when she saw Marisol, color drained from her face. Veronica's champagne glass slipped, shattering on marble with a sound like ice breaking. Celine watched, feeling something complicated. Not satisfaction, not sympathy, but the shock of seeing her untouchable sister finally look afraid. Ethan took Marisol's arm gently. "You didn't have to come. This wasn't your fight." Marisol's voice steadied. "Yes, it was. I let fear silence me for 12 years. Watching you stand tonight, with dignity, not rage, showed me what I owe myself." Mother and son walked back inside together. Their presence commanded the room in a way money never could. Courage wasn't bought. It was lived. Veronica stood rigid as they approached, every defense she'd built collapsing before the woman she'd wronged. From near the entrance, Nadia made a final choice. She signaled the tech crew, people who now understood the stakes. They moved without questions, readying microphones and speakers. Documentation, not sabotage. Whatever happened next would be preserved. Ethan guided Marisol to a quiet corner, still visible, still central. Veronica followed like she was pulled by strings. Ethan murmured, "I didn't ask her to come. This wasn't my plan." Marisol answered softly, "Truth doesn't ask permission. It arrives." Veronica found her voice, thin and frayed. "Dr. Carver, I don't know what to say." Marisol met her eyes. "Then listen." Her tone wasn't cruel, just firm, the voice of a teacher refusing to let a student dodge the lesson. 12 years ago, Marisol said, I discovered scholarship funds being siphoned, money meant for students who were desperate. Guests drifted closer, forming a loose circle. Phones stayed lowered, oddly reverent. Even gossipers sensed this wasn't entertainment. I reported it because it was right, Marisol continued, because those students deserved protection. Veronica swallowed. The room held its breath. Marisol's gaze stayed steady. The investigation should have been simple. I had records, trails, receipts. Then witnesses changed stories, Marisol said. Evidence vanished, and you, she looked directly at Veronica, testified that I fabricated it all, that I was bitter, dishonest. Veronica's whisper shook. I was afraid. I was 25 and drowning in debt. Hardwick offered me a way up, Veronica said. I told myself the truth would surface anyway. Marisol's voice broke slightly. But you knew I was right. You knew students were being robbed, and you chose your career over their futures. Veronica's face crumpled. Tears finally broke through the makeup and pride. Yes, I knew. I've regretted it every day. Her voice cracked. But regret doesn't give you back your work, your name, your life. It doesn't give Ethan back what he sacrificed. The room reacted like a body taking a punch. Gasps, murmurs. This wasn't a single career ruined. It was a family's path bent by one selfish decision. Ethan spoke, gentle but clear. I was 3 semesters from my PhD. I was researching inequality and education, Ethan continued, following my mother's work. When she was blacklisted and couldn't find work, I couldn't justify studying while she struggled. I left. I worked whatever jobs I could, driver's seats, security booths, anything. I never wanted that for him, Marisol said through tears. But he did it because that's who he is. She stared at Veronica. That's the man I raised, even after you and Hardwick tried to strip everything from us. Veronica sank into a nearby chair, legs failing. What do you want from me? She asked, hollow. Money? I'll give anything. An apology? I'll do it now. Marisol shook her head. You can't purchase forgiveness. Money doesn't erase 12 years, Marisol said, voice steady, of being unemployable in my field, of being called a liar, of watching my son abandon his future to protect mine. Veronica looked up, mascara tracking. Then what can I do? Ethan knelt so their eyes were level. A public acknowledgement of her. Tell the world Dr. Marisol Carver was right. Admit you helped bury truth to advance yourself. Use your platform to restore her reputation and open doors you helped slam shut. Veronica's breath hitched. If I do that, everything collapses. Business ties, social standing, political connections. Ethan's reply was soft and mercilessly logical. Then it was built on sand. Maybe it's time to build something real instead. You decide, Ethan said. Keep living the lie and let it rot you from inside, or tell the truth and find out who you might be without deception. Celine stepped forward, voice steadier than Ethan had heard from her all night. I'll support whatever you choose, Celine told Veronica. but I'm done being part of your cruelty. If you make it right, I'll stand with you. If you keep hiding, I'll walk away and build my own life. I'm done." For the first time in adulthood, Celine was the stronger sister. Veronica looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. Courage where she'd always labeled weakness. Nadia approached quietly, resignation already decided, but offering one last truth. "The prop audio is viral," Nadia said softly. "News outlets are running it. By morning, everyone knows. You have maybe an hour to get ahead of this, by being honest before you're forced to be. After that, the choice gets made for you." Veronica scanned the ballroom, faces hungry for a fall, faces curious, faces cold. Her empire balanced on a cliff edge. Then she looked at Marisol's quiet dignity, unbroken. She looked at Ethan, still offering a choice instead of a knife. She looked at Celine. Finally, unchained. Veronica rose slowly, smoothing her dress with shaking hands. She walked to the room's center. The tech crew activated microphones before anyone asked, and the mansion's air tightened into absolute attention. Every conversation died mid-syllable. Glasses lowered. Phones rose. Veronica stood under the crystal chandelier, light turning her both luminous and exposed. Nadia hovered near the booth, ensuring every word would be captured. History documented, not edited. Veronica's voice arrived stripped of polish, trembling with raw truth. 12 years ago, she began, I was a graduate student crushed by debt and terrified of my future. I was working in Councilman Hardwick's office when Dr. Marisol Carver filed a complaint. She discovered scholarship funds, money meant for students who desperately needed it, were being diverted to private accounts, Veronica said, tears streaming. And she was right. I knew she was right because I'd seen irregularities myself. The crowd barely breathed. This wasn't the speech they expected. But instead of supporting her, Veronica continued, I made a choice, the wrong choice. Hardwick offered me a deal, testify against her, call her evidence fake, and he'd launch my career. I took it, Veronica confessed. I lied under oath. I destroyed a woman who was trying to protect students. Gasps rippled, heavier now that suspicion had become confirmed fact. Journalists typed furiously, phones vibrated like insects. Because of my testimony, Veronica said, the investigation cleared Hardwick. Dr. Carver was discredited, blacklisted, and pushed out. She gestured toward Ethan. And her son, Ethan, was forced to abandon his doctoral work to support her. Cameras flashed like lightning. Hardwick tried slipping toward an exit, but several guests blocked him. Some had heard his threat to Ethan earlier. His face went pale with fear as his decades of control evaporated in a room full of witnesses. I spent 12 years building an empire on that lie, Veronica said, voice breaking. I preached about education while knowing I helped steal from students. I lectured about integrity while lacking it. She swallowed. Tonight I invited a good man, intending cruelty, never realizing who he was. I can't undo the past, Veronica continued. I can't restore lost years. I can't give Marisol back her research or Ethan back the education he sacrificed. But I can tell the truth. I can use what I have to repair what I damaged. I will work to restore Dr. Carver's reputation, she said, and create a foundation to support whistleblowers who risk everything to expose corruption. Silence followed, profound, stunned. Then Marisol stepped forward, walking through the crowd as if parting water. Marisol reached the podium and looked at Veronica for a long moment. Thank you, she said simply, voice clear. Not for what you did 12 years ago, but for finally admitting it. This isn't redemption, it's the beginning of accountability. Marisol turned to the crowd. I never wanted revenge, she said. I wanted my name cleared and the chance to do the work I love. Teaching, research, helping students understand systems shaping their lives. Her hands trembled, but her posture never bent. A distinguished woman stepped forward. Dr. Carver, I'm Dr. Catherine Blackwell, Director of the Institute for Economic Policy at Riverside State University. If you're willing, I'd like to offer you a position leading our new program on inequality and educational access. Marisol's hand flew to her mouth. You're serious? Blackwell nodded. Completely. Your work is still cited by the people who matter. Integrity doesn't expire. Marisol turned toward Ethan, tears spilling freely now. Ethan smiled. Pride and relief mingled. Take it, Mom. The ballroom erupted into applause. Thunderous, genuine. Not for Veronica, but for Marisol, for truth surviving sabotage, for justice finally arriving. Hardwick, desperate, grabbed a microphone from a service stand, forcing a politician's smile into place. This is circumstantial, Hardwick insisted. Veronica is emotional. These claims were investigated and dismissed. Damian Turner stepped forward, phone raised. Actually, I have emails between you and Veronica from 12 years ago about discrediting Dr. Carver. I have financial records showing irregular transfers, Damian continued, and documentation of payments to witnesses who changed stories. Hardwick's face drained. Where did you get that? Damian glanced at Nadia, a source who decided truth matters more than comfort. Two men in dark suits pushed through. Councilman Hardwick, one said, Federal Prosecutor's Office. We've been monitoring this for the past hour. We need you for questioning. Hardwick's protests dissolved into noise as cameras recorded his removal. His power crumbled in minutes, collapsed by receipts and his own arrogance. Veronica watched him go. Understanding her own reckoning was just beginning. She stepped down from the podium. No longer hostess, no longer commander, just accountable. Graham Vale, hedge fund predator who'd once courted Celine's anger, approached Veronica, expression unexpectedly plain. That took courage, he said, without manipulation for once. I came hoping to profit from your fall. I didn't expect you to choose truth. Don't confuse this with nobility, Veronica replied, exhausted. I confessed because I couldn't live with the alternative. Graham nodded. Sometimes that's the only honest reason. He extended a hand. I won't use this against you. You punished yourself better than I could. Veronica shook his hand, startled by mercy. In the garden, Selina found Veronica sitting alone on a bench, night air cool against hot shame. They sat without speaking, the mansion's noise muffled by hedges and distance. I'm stepping away, Celine said finally. Not as your shadow, not as your enemy, just as myself. I'm selling jewelry to pay my debts. I'm starting something small and honest. It might fail, but at least it'll be mine. Veronica looked at her sister and saw a bravery she'd never managed. You're braver than I was, she admitted. Celine shook her head. No, I'm just tired of being afraid. She stood, smoothing her dress. I don't forgive you, but I don't hate you. I want us to be better, Selina finished, even if it's separately. She walked back toward the mansion, leaving Veronica alone with wind, regret, and the distant sound of a party that had mutated into a tribunal. Inside, Nadia approached Marisol and Ethan, resignation letter folded in her pocket like a quiet bomb. I'm sorry, Nadia said, voice thick. I should have asked questions years ago. I should have refused complicity. I'm sorry it took me this long. You did it when you were ready, Marisol replied, kindness steady. That's all any of us can do. Ethan pulled an envelope from his jacket and handed it to Nadia. Dr. Blackwell asked me to give you this. They need an administrative director, Ethan explained. Someone who understands institutions and the cost of silence. Nadia opened the offer with shaking hands. It paid less than Veronica's world, but it offered something money couldn't: purpose. I don't deserve this, Nadia whispered. Marisol shook her head gently. None of us deserve grace. We receive it, and then we live differently. Nadia pressed the letter to her chest, as if anchoring herself to a new life. Morning light found Veronica still awake, sitting in last night's dress, watching her confession looped across every channel. Headlines were brutal, some praising courage, most condemning theft and cruelty. All agreed her empire had been permanently altered. Her phone buzzed with lawyers, PR teams, furious partners. She ignored them. She'd spent 12 years building an immaculate mask, and in one night she'd shattered it herself. Strangely, she felt lighter than she had in years. Maintaining lies had weighed more than facing truth, even when truth burned. Across town, Marisol stared at Riverside State's offer letter. Research leadership, students to mentor, the work she'd been denied returning in a form she never expected. Ethan made breakfast, the same modest meal they'd eaten for years, even though life might soon improve. Some habits were worth keeping, reminders of survival. Are you going to accept? Ethan asked, setting a plate down like an offering. Yes, Marisol said, voice firm. Not because Veronica confessed. Because I earned this. I refuse to let them define me. Ethan smiled. I'm proud of you. Marisol reached across the table and squeezed his hand. I've always been proud of you. What about you? Marisol asked. Dr. Blackwell said they'd welcome you back to finish your doctorate. You were so close. Ethan stared out the window at the waking city, remembering lectures like ghost music. I need to think, he said. For so long, I've been defined by what was taken. Maybe I have to learn who I am now, not who I was supposed to be then. His voice held both longing and a strange new steadiness. Later, Veronica faced her board in a glass conference room at Stratton Tower. Every face held judgment, math, and fear. The chair spoke bluntly. We need your resignation, effective immediately. Veronica nodded, like she'd expected nothing else. I've drafted it, Veronica said calmly, but I'm asking one thing. The board exchanged wary glances. I want to establish a foundation, funded by my personal assets, no company money, to support whistleblowers who lose careers for telling the truth. I want to name it for Dr. Marisol Carver, if she permits, Veronica continued, and staff it with people who understand the cost of silence. The chair's tone stayed careful. Admirable. It doesn't undo damage or protect this company. I know, Veronica replied. I'm not asking for forgiveness or mercy. I'm asking to do something meaningful with what I've left. The board deliberated briefly, then agreed, perhaps because quiet restitution was safer than a publicly spiraling founder. Veronica signed papers, surrendered access cards, and walked out of Stratton Tower as its founder for the last time. Reporters shouted questions. She didn't answer. She walked past them without designer armor, face bare, choosing discomfort over disguise. That afternoon, Damien published the full investigation. Comprehensive, damning, and precise. It detailed theft, cover-up, Veronica's role, Hardwick's corruption, and the confession. Political fallout hit fast. Charges, resignations, audits, reforms, and restitution efforts for harmed students. Social fallout split. Some friends vanished overnight, unwilling to touch scandal. Others reached out quietly, not excusing her but acknowledging that confession required a different muscle than conquest. Veronica accepted neither praise nor comfort. She simply kept moving. Evening found Ethan sitting in an empty lecture hall at Columbia University, a place he hadn't entered in years. He'd called ahead for permission, curiosity following his new notoriety. He sat in the back row, staring at the podium where his old future once stood. The dream he'd abandoned felt both distant and painfully close, like a coat that still fit but smelled like another life. His phone buzzed. Veronica, if you choose to return, I'll fund it, not charity repayment for what I took. He stared a long time. Ethan finally typed, I'll think about it. If I return, it's on my terms, in my time. Not because you paid, but because I'm ready. Her reply came fast. That's fair, more than fair. For once, she didn't argue. Celine sat in a small storefront she'd rented using money from selling a diamond bracelet, one of Veronica's old gifts. The space was bare, paint samples, sketches, cheap folding chairs. Uncertainty terrified her and thrilled her too. Veronica called. Celine hesitated, then answered. I'm not offering money, Veronica said quickly. I'm sorry. For using you as a target, for making you feel small, for being the sister you deserved better than. Celine's throat tightened. Sorry doesn't fix the past, Celine said. I know, Veronica answered. But maybe it can be the start of different futures. Celine exhaled. I hope you mean it. Veronica's voice softened. I do. I hope your business succeeds because it's yours. After the call, Celine cried alone in her empty storefront. Not from defeat, but from release. Being seen as a person, not a prop, in Veronica's story. A week later, a small group gathered at a modest restaurant. Good food, no pretension. Ethan and Marisol, Damien and Nadia, Celine by herself. They were unlikely allies stitched together by truth and fallout. Veronica arrived last, unsure she belonged. She wore jeans and a plain sweater. No diamonds, no armor, just a woman trying. Marisol stood and Veronica braced to be turned away. Instead, Marisol gestured to an empty chair. If you sit, she said, sit as yourself. It wasn't forgiveness, just possibility. The quiet work of rebuilding began. A perfect image can hide a rotten deal. If you've lived long enough to remember when a handshake meant something, this story hits like a cold wind. Veronica Stratton stood 60 floors up, staring through glass like she owned the sky, preaching integrity the way some people recite a prayer they don't believe. She had the posture, the polish, the charitable logo behind her, everything America loves to celebrate on the evening news. But underneath that emerald gown was a bargain she'd made years earlier, a lie traded for a career. Many of us were raised to believe success should be earned the hard way. Work, honesty, a clean conscience. Yet life teaches a tougher truth. Some people climb by stepping on others, and they learn to call it strength. Veronica didn't just win, she took. Scholarship money meant for students, a professor's reputation, a family's future. And for 12 years she told herself the past was buried. But the past has a way of showing up at the front door, dressed better than anyone expected. Dignity doesn't wear a name tag. Ethan Carver was the driver, the kind of man powerful people barely see, until they need him. He polished a limo like it mattered, not because someone would praise him, but because his work was his word. Older folks understand that kind of pride. You don't need applause to do the right thing. You do it because it's who you are. Veronica invited Ethan to her gala as entertainment. the same way cruel people toss a penny just to watch you bend. She wanted a moment, a reminder of hierarchy, a little joke for donors sipping champagne. But Ethan arrived in a tailored ivory suit, stepping out of a vintage Rolls-Royce with the calm of a man who'd survived worse than gossip. And suddenly, the room felt different. Here's the lesson. A uniform can hide a scholar, a leader, a good man, and a designer gown can hide a thief. Some of you learned that in factories, in churches, in military service, or, while raising kids on a tight budget. Character shows up in the quiet choices, not the loud titles. Ethan's dignity didn't come from the suit. The suit simply stopped people from pretending they couldn't see it. Truth needs an audience, and courage needs company. This wasn't a victory built on shouting or revenge. It was built on witnesses. Nadia, Veronica's longtime right hand, finally got tired of calling cruelty excellence. Damien, the journalist, connected the dots and brought receipts. And then the moment that made the whole mansion go still. Dr. Marisol Carver walked in, Ethan's mother, the professor whose name had been dragged through the mud. When Marisol spoke, it wasn't flashy. It was steady, like a teacher who refuses to let a classroom dodge the lesson. And when Veronica finally confessed, out loud, under chandeliers, in front of the very people she'd tried to impress, something rare happened. The truth stopped being a rumor and became a fact. Older Americans know this. Real accountability is expensive. Not in dollars, but in pride, reputation, and comfort. It costs friendships, it costs status, but it can give something back that money can't touch: peace, restoration, the chance to rebuild a life on solid ground. Veronica's empire cracked because it was built on sand. Ethan didn't knock it down. He simply stood there long enough for everyone to see what it was made of. The legacy you leave. At 65 and beyond, you start thinking less about applause and more about what lasts. This story isn't just about a gala. It's about the kind of country we want our grandkids to inherit. One where the powerful don't get to rewrite history, and where ordinary dignity can outshine an entire ballroom of wealth. Truth may arrive late, but when it arrives, it changes the room. If you were in that ballroom, what would you have done? Would you have stayed quiet to protect your comfort, like so many guests did at first? Or would you have spoken up the moment you saw someone being used as a prop? And here's the harder question. Have you ever watched a person with power humiliate someone beneath them and felt that familiar knot in your stomach? I'd love to hear your story in the comments. If this lesson meant something to you, please tap like, subscribe to my channel, and share this video so more people can learn and speak up together.